Hey guys, did you hear about the chicken rendang scandal over on MasterChef UK? Apparently one of the contestants was eliminated because the judges felt that her chicken skin needed to be crispy.
Oh my god, how can they be so ignorant about Malaysian food? Food plays such an important part in their identity as a people.
Now that you mention it, I do agree that food has an integral role to play in every culture. Whenever I go overseas and think of home, I usually think of chili crab and chicken rice.
What about somewhere like ancient Rome around 500 BCE? While we are learning about their history, we rarely considered how food played a role in their identity.
That's true. I think that when considering a civilization or culture, it is worthwhile to consider the various types of food that they consume. The ancient Romans ate different food among the different classes, and we should discuss how food differed, not just in terms of variety, but also in terms of who ate what.
So today we're going to be talking about the various food groups, which include staples, meat, vegetables and wine, and we'll be taking a closer look at how the differences in food consumption between the rich and the poor in the ancient Roman Republic reflects their status in society and how it played a role in shaping their identity.
So to begin with, let's talk about staples. Have you guys ever tried millet rice?
Yeah, actually I have, but it was quite expensive. I've been to a couple of places and they charge extra for changing millet white rice to millet rice.
I've had a similar experience actually, where I had to pay extra for millet. So check this out. In the ancient Roman Republic, the rich considered millet to be inferior to regular wheat and therefore thought of millet to be only fit for livestock.
Oh yeah, now that you've said that, I've actually heard the same thing about how lobsters were originally meant for the poor and the prisoners.
So although the average Roman diet consisted of olive, wheat, and wine, the impoverished or low SES Romans had little variety in terms of food choice. I'm sure you can all imagine a similar phenomenon in our current day, where the poor simply eat whatever they can get their hands on. For this reason, I would assume that foods that were cheap due to it being produced in bulk, as well as food that could be stored for long periods of time, would be common among the poor. To elaborate further, millet was a prime example of this kind of food. Italy's favourable climate, coupled with its ability to be grown and harvested 3 times a calendar year, made millet the go-to staple for the poor. This reasoning might have been why millet was commonly associated with famines and food shortage. This might have been due to the wealthier Romans having no choice but to consume millet during times of drought and other natural disaster.
Was millet really the only staple that the poor Romans ate? I always thought Romans were famous for their grand feasts.
Okay, so not really. Around 100 CE, the poor Romans added oat to their diet. However, this might not have been by choice. Oat, similar to millet, was yet another hardy crop that could be grown multiple times a year. On top of being eaten raw, oat could also be used in oatmeal, boiled into porridge, ground into flour, and baked.
What about bread though? I heard all Romans ate bread. I happen to love my bread with olive oil.
The strangest part about bread was that it had its own internal hierarchy. It came as no surprise that this hierarchy was not based on nutritional value, but on how pure and white the grain looked. Thus, wheat was the most sought after, followed by barley, rye, and oat. Not to sound lazy here, but there are just too many varieties of bread and flour to get into right now. But the most important takeaway I feel is to know that one item, bread, was called different things in ancient Rome based on what it was made of and for whom it was made for. This really reminded me of Joey's blog post on Roman baths, where she informs us that the different kinds of baths and rooms were called different things. I actually made you guys some millet pancakes, although I'm pretty sure pancakes weren't popular in ancient Rome. I wouldn't want to torture you guys to eat bland millet. So these pancakes were made with millet flour. So let's dig in.
The Romans seem to really love their carbs, but what about their meat?
Well, first off, the poor ate little meat as it was pricey. The exceptions were during religious festivals, which required animals to be sacrificed. If in luck, they might manage to get a small, minute portion of sausages. Unsurprisingly, the rich organized fancy feasts, which serve plenty of various types of meat like venison, goat, and mutton. Birds that are commonly eaten today like chicken, geese, and ducks were part of their diets too. Some surprising things that the rich ate would be exotic birds like flamingos, ostriches, and even peacocks.
Hey, peacocks weren't the only thing that the Romans ate. One meal involved stuffing a chicken, duck, goose, pig, and cow all simultaneously together. Even Gordon Ramsay wouldn't know how to do that.
Well, yes, I think Gordon Ramsay would very likely be surprised that fish sauce, which is widely used to elevate the flavors of a dish, especially in Southeast Asian dishes, has origins that leads back to the Roman Empire. Garum, aka fish sauce, was like the MSG of their time, and it makes food a lot more tasty.
So how was fish sauce made?
Well, similar to the fish sauce that we Asians use, the Roman version also involved fermentation of fish and salt after they were laid. Some utilized the entire fish, others involved the use of internal organs and blood of the fish. The rich, who had more access to other ingredients like honey, wine, and herbs, could mix it with fish sauce to make variants of sauces.
Wow, what kind of fish do they eat?
The rich owned private fish ponds where they could rear their own fishes from mackerels to eels. On the other hand, the poor would usually go for freshwater fish. Since the Romans were adept at preserving food, they could use it on fishes to ensure that they consumed enough protein, especially when supply was scarce. Here I have fried mackerel with Asian fish sauce. Oh my god. For an Asian twist on the fish which Romans ate, and a couple of luncheon meat, which to represent the small pieces of meat that the poor would have eaten if they were able to obtain any meat.
I'm so glad I didn't have to taste this because I'm vegetarian.
I heard that just like the Greeks, the Romans also enjoyed eating porridge as their source of wheat. Is that true?
Yes, porridge was a staple for all Romans.
But porridge tastes extremely bland. How did they manage to eat it every day?
In order to get variety to their food, the Romans added different kinds of fruits and vegetables to their food.
What kind of vegetables did they eat then?
The Romans consumed a variety of vegetables like cucumbers, lentils, beans, legumes, and peas, which were their staples. They occasionally even consumed vegetables like asparagus, turnips, and celery. And sometimes they even mixed these vegetables into bread because it served as a good way of getting protein.
Oh, so you mean something like the Italian focaccia, which is topped with herbs?
Yes, that's correct.
So was there a difference in the vegetables that the rich and the poor ate?
Not quite. There was no class difference between the vegetables that were consumed by the rich and the poor. The only difference was that the rich Romans could afford spices, which they imported from all the way from Southeast Asia, like India, etc. So these spices included like cloves, nutmeg, cinnamon, and all of that. The rich would also enjoy a lot of meat along with these vegetables, so they would not eat these vegetables alone.
I see. So were the vegetables consumed on their own, or were they consumed with and when added to food?
In daily life, vegetables could be consumed along with something or on their own as well. But during lavish dinner parties, these vegetables were actually served as appetizers. So there were only certain vegetables that were served as appetizers. They were basically asparagus, carrot, and cabbage, and sometimes even beetroot.
Oh, that sounds amazing. How did they prepare these dishes?
The Romans used loads of garlic, olive oil, and olives and herbs when cooking their food. The olive oil was an essential ingredient as it served as their main source of fat.
The Romans were extremely healthy then. and probably the reason why olive oil is so popular today, especially for its health benefits. You mentioned they also enjoy eating fruit. What sort of fruit do they like to eat?
They love eating peaches, pears, apples, plums, cherries, dates, and figs, which are dried in order to increase their shelf life so that they would last for longer.
But what about vegetables? How do the Romans preserve that?
In order to preserve the fruits and vegetables that they ate, the Romans would marinate them in vinegar or brine or simply conserve them in grape juice, wine, or honey.
That sounds pretty clever and interesting to how modern methods of preservation are today.
Yes, except nowadays everything is mechanized. Anyway, here I have two different types of porridge. So they're actually the same, but they're served in different styles. So this is for the rich. It's seasoned with like a lot of spices, which were imported from all over the world. And this has fewer vegetables, and it does not have any spices. So this is for the poor. So if this is really bad, I'm sorry, guys.
At the count of 3, okay, Zena? 1, 2, 3.
Hey, cut.
This is the worst one. This is the worst one so far.
Oh my god! Now that we know so much about their food, what about their drinks? I've heard that Romans are crazy for wine. If Milo was considered the national drink of Singapore, can wine be considered the national drink of Rome?
Yes, wine can be actually considered the national drink of Rome. I think there are a few fun facts that you might be interested to know.
Oh really? Tell me all about it.
Well, the Romans drank mulsum, which is a type of wine sweetened with honey. The honey is only added in right before they drink the wine. Suddenly sounds yucky, but mulsum is often served at the beginning of a meal as an aperitif to stimulate one's appetite. It is an appetizer in today's context, just that it's in liquid form. Also, the rich Romans actually drank their wine diluted. It was also said that drinking undiluted wine called nerum was actually considered the habit of barbarians. So they would actually mix wine with warm water or sometimes even seawater at the ratio of 1:2.
That's right. I actually cannot see. The intention of diluting the wine was for them to enjoy the aesthetic pleasure of wine, to be just slightly tipsy, to allow the one to be free and let them speak their mind.
Oh, I thought diluting the wine was actually to save up costs. Like, adding water will make a bigger quantity so they can drink it for a longer time.
Even slaves get to enjoy wine, but of course the quality of the wine was not as good as the ones that was served to the rich. Also, women were actually not allowed to consume wine at all. Women in ancient Rome drank barley instead of as an alternative for wine.
Oh, thankfully that does not apply to us today, and we can enjoy a glass of wine every now and then. So since we learned so much about wine, the different types of wine, shall we try some?
Yes.
Adding honey. You can just come in. Try some. Then try. It's too much. Okay, it's okay.
Just mix for all of us. Yeah, it's actually all here.
It's definitely interesting to know like all about the different food that the rich and the poor ate. Thank you so much for sharing. I've gained so much insight on the types of food that the different classes in ancient Rome ate. Now I feel like I'm an expert in the food and drinks aspect of the ancient Rome.
Cheers!